The Lifestyle Show, presented by Selina MacKenzie.
We have managed to get hold of our first guest for today. So she has written an account of a very ordinary woman, she says, who during a 38-year career in nursing had many exciting and far from ordinary adventures. Here to tell us about her book, Never Argue with a Matron. Welcome to the show, Mary Sandilands.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Mary. So were you a matron then, or were you a nurse under a matron?
I was only a matron almost by accident, usually an acting matron or a deputy matron. But I was never appointed as a matron. And as I never even wanted to be a ward sister, that was no hardship not to be a matron.
And did you do nursing straight from school?
Oh, yes. And that's why the book is called Never Argue with a Matron, because from the age of 3, I wanted to be a nurse. And our doctor said, do orthopaedic nursing first, because you can start at the age of 17, not 18. And I didn't want to stay in the sixth form at school. So my mother wrote to our local orthopaedic hospital matron, who wrote back and said, I was too young to be interviewed. I might change my mind about wanting to be a nurse. At which point, I had a sense of humour failure. My mother wrote again. I was interviewed and I did become a nurse.
Wow. It must be a very, very rewarding job.
Oh, at its best, it's absolutely unsurpassable.
Yeah. But then, as your book will tell, there are all sorts of things that can go wrong. And exciting things. I believe you spent months as a nursing sister on board the P&O liner Oriana?
Yes, I did. At the time, it was fashionable. Quite a lot of my colleagues were applying to shipping lines. And in fact, one friend was working with the Cunard line. And I went up to London to investigate at Australia House, emigrating to Australia. But I knew where I wanted to go, I knew the hospital, and I was back out in the Strand 10 minutes later. And then I thought of shipping offices, and I went across the road to a post office and looked up addresses and found the P&O office. And when I got there, I said I'd understood that the waiting list was very long. And this man looked at me and he said, you do realise we get 8 applications every day? So I said, thank you very much, and turned to go away. And he said, just a minute. And I left having had an interview with the medical superintendent and a medical to save me coming all the way back up to London from Plymouth.
Oh, blimey. You didn't realise?
No. All I had done, in fact, was bypass the original letter of interest or application that most girls wrote. And at the end of it, there was a long requirement of professional experience. And at the bottom, it said, if ever you are in London, please call at this office. And really, all I had done was bypass the initial letter of inquiry. But I didn't know that.
Lovely story. And I've got a few other bits here, like a story. I don't know what the story is, but the stories include the tale of a Christian Dior necklace.
Oh, yes. That was when I was still a student nurse doing my orthopaedic training in Oxford. And in the private patients wing, we had Baron von Rothschild. I didn't know his Christian name at the time, and von was odd, but never mind. He was Baron von Rothschild. And he was flat on his back with a back pain or back injury. And we had a very attractive nurse in my set on the ward. And he learnt that it was her birthday. And he asked her what she would like from Paris as a birthday present. and she asked for gloves, and they arrived the next day. And bear in mind, this is 1953. Paris was a lot further away mentally than it is now. And it caused such a sensation that he called each of us into his room and asked what we would like from Paris. And I rather tentatively said pearls, meaning artificial ones. I never got the chance to explain that. He suggested costume jewellery. So I said, thank you very much, that would be lovely. And the box arrived. It was a biggish square box, 6-7 inches square. And it had this beautiful 3-strand necklace in it of beaten beads, pale, pearly blue-grey ones with linked strands with diamante circles in between each bead. And I opened it in the ward office, and we couldn't work out quite how it was to be fixed, because it had a hook, like a big one, but like the ones you get in hook and eye fastenings, and a chain hanging down. And we didn't think that the hook round the chain would balance properly, and couldn't try it on over uniform very successfully. So I crept back into his room, where his mistress, Mrs. Pamela Churchill, used to sit beside him, feeding him with grapes. She eventually married Avril Harriman and became the American ambassadress to Paris, to France, and he described her as the greatest courtesan of the 20th century. She didn't like other women, and she sneered at me when I asked how to close the necklace and showed me. And then she looked at me very pityingly and she said, you do know what the CD stands for on the box? Because it was dark red cardboard with CD in gold letters. And of course I had to admit that, no, I didn't know what CD stood for. And it was Christian Dior.
Wow. He sounds like a very kind man.
Oh, I think he was. Yes.
Do you still have it?
Oh, yes. I've still got it. It's quite precious.
I'm sure it is. And at one point you mentioned when you were a midwife, I've got here, while you were a pupil midwife in Plymouth, you owned a rowing boat.
Oh, yes. That was when I was doing what in those days was known as Part 2 midwifery, because our midwifery training was in 2 parts, 6 months and then 6 months. And the second 6 months could be either 3 in hospital and 3 on the district, or 6 months on the district. And I had been advised that 6 months was best. In Plymouth, we lived in a big house that was in Stonehouse, opposite the Royal Marine Barracks. And out at the back on the other side of the road was Stonehouse Creek, which was a creek that came in from the River Tamar. And I went for a walk one day and looked down onto the beach below, and there were several boats there. And I saw one, an old rowing boat, with a for sale sign on it. And to cut quite a long story short, my friend came back from her long weekend. We went to see the boatyard owner who sent us to the boat owner, and we bought the rowing boat for £9, stuffed putty in the holes, were given paint and lent a pair of oars, and our midwives came and performed a christening ceremony, a naming ceremony. We had a barbecue to celebrate, and we did quite a few rowing trips in the boat. And that was all because we were close enough to the nurses' home to be called if we were needed, if somebody was in labour and we had to buzz off.
There's some incredible stories, lovely stories. Did you travel a lot around the world when you were nursing?
Quite a lot, because of course Oriana was built to take a week off the voyage to Australia, and with several open decks so that she could sail in the Pacific. So she went round the world once in one direction and once in the other when I was on board. She also went out to Australia and New Zealand and up through the Pacific to Hawaii and across to the west coast of America, to Canada, to Vancouver and to San Francisco. And she did one voyage in the Mediterranean in the summer. So, and I think there was another one out to Australia and New Zealand and then straight home again. But I really was very lucky. I saw a lot. And then when I was a QA, I served in Hong Kong and Nepal and Germany and Cyprus.
That's incredible. You've had an incredible life. Am I right that you flew with the Red Arrows once?
Yes. They decided that the girls should have a flight with them, and so half a dozen of us were chosen, and we went down and we got fitted into all the gear. And it always amused me that my bone dome, my hat, was fitted with a screwdriver, because they were very fussy about what's the proper name? Anyway, the
helmet.
Thank you. The helmet and the helmet and the gloves and the G-force trousers, they all had to be fitted very precisely. So yes, it was fitted with a screwdriver.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny. When did you retire, Mary?
1991. When I was 55. When I was 55, because that was the age for majors to retire.
And do you miss it?
No.
You're enjoying your retirement.
Yes.
Good for you. Good for you. Well, I can honestly say I could listen to your voice all day. You've got a very calming voice, Mary.
Oh, have I?
That's nice. You have. You should do an audio book as well as the book you've written.
Oh my goodness, it's a big enough surprise to have the book published. It was only notes for myself and my family.
Oh, how did it happen then? Did somebody send it to a publisher?
No, my sister was an Oxford University librarian, and she read the first one, but that was years ago. And then eventually in COVID, I wrote the second bit, and she read that. And to my astonishment, she gave it back and said, "You are a very good writer. You should publish." And I thought, well, if Jenny thinks I should publish, I'd better do something about it.
It's a great idea. I love the sound of this book, and there is so much more. You've had so many more adventures that we've mentioned. For our listeners, we're selling it right now on our website, TRE.radio, on our bookshop. It's called Never Argue with a Matron, Adventures in 20th Century Nursing, and it's by the lovely Mary Sandilands, who we're chatting to now. Mary, it's been a delight to chat to you. Thank you so very much for being on today's show with us.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
You have a lovely day. Good luck with the book.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.